of Tulsa president for this year. I want to give a brief update on the startup committee meeting we had yesterday. The committee continues to meet each month and monitor the COVID situation. It was decided at yesterday's meeting that although each and every one of us on the committee wants to meet back in person as soon as we can, that it's in the best interest of our club right now to remain virtual in the Zoom format through June of this year. The committee will continue each month to meet and monitor the situation, and as always, we'll be able to adjust the time frame if dramatic improvements seen. I do want to give a quick shout out to our program committee that continues to put together great, stellar, top-notch programs, with today being no exception. Program committee this year is led by Lane Dolly, Matt Davis, and Ed Monette. Thank you each for your continued hard work on that important committee. I appreciate it. And so does our club. Please welcome our Rotarian of the Day, past president, Matt Davis. Matt?
Thanks, President Paul. I have the distinct honor today of introducing someone who needs absolutely no introduction, our favorite newscaster in all of Oklahoma, and also the kind and generous, incredible Master of Ceremonies for our Above and Beyond Awards. I was trying to think how many years Lori has been doing that. I guessed 8, and somebody else guessed 5, and someone guessed 7. Do you know how many years you've been doing it? No.
I'm not sure.
Well, all I know is that thing wouldn't be what it is if it weren't for your kindness and the incredible professionalism that you bring to that every time. So I know everybody's read all of her amazing long resume that we sent out ahead of time. I just want to say we are honored and thrilled to have as our speaker today, Lori Fulbright.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I was asked to talk a little bit about my job. I don't know how many of you saw my post last weekend, but I've now had my 29th anniversary at News on 6. So I came here after 2 TV stations in Missouri right out of college, and it has been amazing. People ask me all the time, did I choose to be the crime reporter? No, I was assigned to be the crime reporter when I got here, but clearly that was meant to be. People ask me all the time, do you wear a bulletproof vest as a crime reporter? Yes, I have many, many times. I have been punched in the face on a crime story. I have been shoved and kicked and pushed and cussed. And I tell people that sometimes before I get out of the newsroom. I knocked on a drug dealer's door once and had him open the door, throw a pit bull at me and slam the door. So it has been an interesting career, of course, and it's been hard in some ways to cover some of the hardest stories that we've seen in the last 29 years here, but it's also very rewarding. We've gotten 2 different laws changed. We've helped countless victims. We helped lots of bad guys get caught. So it's very rewarding, although it's emotionally difficult, as we've definitely seen this week. I was 12 years old when I decided I wanted to be a reporter, and I have loved coming to work every single day, and I still do every single day. So I'm one of those few that's very, very blessed to get to do something that I love. And I'm very fortunate to work for a couple of Muskogee guys, the Griffin brothers, who own News on 6. And no matter how crazy it seems, when I go to them with an idea, like international travel, they say, go. As long as you're focusing on Oklahomans, go. And that's been such a blessing. So I've been to Bosnia, and I covered off Americans who were called up to that peacekeeping mission. When we landed, shots were being fired from the woods at our plane, and it was, snow up to our knees. And for a week when we lived on the base with the Americans, we ate those MREs, and thank goodness Bosnian women who made homemade bread for us every day and brought it to us in a big trash bag. And I've gotten to go to Iraq. And when I was in Iraq with some Oklahoma guys, I got to fly in a Black Hawk every day on missions with them for a week, and experience the sandstorms and the heat and the spiders. And it was just such an interesting thing to focus on Oklahomans and show what they're really doing overseas. We got to go to the Adriatic Sea and cover the Oklahoma guys who rescued Captain Scott O'Grady. So if you guys remember, during Bosnia, he was shot down, and he was actually on the Bosnian side, and he lived on bugs and twigs for like 3 days waiting for their rescue. Well, I mean, it was daring. They fly in this chopper, they scoop him up, they fly out. They're getting shot at the whole time. Well, those were Oklahoma boys. So we flew over to the Adriatic Sea and interviewed them. We were on the ship with them. And I mean, that chopper still had bullet holes when we were there interviewing them. And it was so amazing to hear their story. And of course, I stayed on the ship, which is 5,000 men and one woman. So that was quite an experience. But I had to sleep because, you know, like 700 guys sleep in one room. So they put me in the hospital on the ship, and I had my own private room, and I had a guard outside my door. But of course, everybody was super great. And it's like a floating city. It's 5,000 people. The ship is about the size of the town I grew up in. And so they even have a TV station on board. They have a mall, a church, you know, a hospital. And I got to do the news for their TV station on the ship. So that was a really cool experience. We also wanted to go to London and see what it's like for cops over there not to have guns, and of course citizens not to have guns. And when I suggested that story idea, I thought there's no way. And they're like, hey, go to London for a week. So we did. And we rode around with the bobbies, and they have 999 calls instead of 911. And it was amazing to see their reaction to something like, say, a domestic violence call. We ride with the cops here on a domestic violence call, and as soon as the cops go up to the house, we're getting behind a tree because we expect gunfire. But over there, they just run in and say, you know, stop that, behave yourself, come with me. And they're like, okay. We're like, yeah, that's not how it works in America. But they all wore bulletproof vests, even though citizens didn't have guns, because they were so worried about being stabbed. That's why they wore the vest. So that was a really great experience. We wanted to go to St. Lucia because, and yes, I know my boss at first was like, really, a Caribbean island? That's where you want to go on assignment? But they had sent some officers here to Tulsa to tour and see what it was like here. And then our officers were going there. So of course we wanted to tag along with our officers, and it was so eye-opening because we lived with some of the officers in St. Lucia. Their houses didn't even have running water. They came to our jail and they saw, you know, clean clothes and bedding, and it was just a different mindset. We went to their jail to see what it was like. And I'm just gonna say, don't get arrested in St. Lucia. That would not be ideal. But they also took us hunting for marijuana in the mountains. And so we climbed through these mountains in St. Lucia. Everybody thought I was walking on the beach in St. Lucia, but that's really not what it was like. So that was a great experience. And then just 2 years ago, hopefully you remember this story, but I went to the station and said, you know, there's an international SWAT team competition going on in Jordan. And our team is only one. Tulsa's was one of only two from the entire United States, ended up being the only one going, and we should go cover them. And again, I thought there's no way. But the Griffins were like, go to Jordan. So that was a great experience. It was very interesting when we got in the cab, just trying to explain to people, you know, in customs, not speaking the language, we're not staying in a hotel. We're going to some base out in the middle of the mountains, and we're covering the cops. And that was kind of tricky, getting a cab and trying to explain to him, we're not going to a hotel. And at some point along the journey, he pulled over. And of course, we're thinking, this is it. We've seen those movies, Taken, this is going to happen. And so we are getting ready. We undo our seatbelts. We're looking around. What can we have in our hands as a weapon? We got, you know, a camera. And all he was doing was waiting on a guy to bring us some teas and some water, some bottled drinks. And we were like, oh, okay, good. This is good. And he got lost a few times on the way out there. And we're going through these areas that don't look very good in Jordan. And we're thinking, what is this about? But bless his heart, he was just lost. And so we got there, and that was such a great trip. We weren't sure how Americans would be received in Jordan at the SWAT games. They loved our cops, and our cops went out of their way to be so sweet and so kind, because our cops were way bigger than anybody else. I mean, you know, the little guys from all these other countries were like 180 pounds, you know, and here comes our big old corn-fed Oklahoma men, and there's some big old guys on our SWAT team. But they went out of their way to not seem as big, you know, they were so sweet, and they were helping each other. Hey, on this next competition, get ready. They're going to, you know, count you off for this. And it was really fun. It was really great. And of course they did so well. So that was another really great experience. So I've been so blessed in my career to have covered lots of different kinds of stories that most local reporters don't get to cover. When Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols blew up the Murrah building, not only did I work on that site for 6 weeks out of an RV, but when the trial came up in Denver, my boss was like, "You got to move to Denver." And I was like, I don't know about that. But I did. I gave up my apartment in Tulsa and they got me an apartment in Denver. And I moved out there for almost an entire year and was in court every day, for months and months, covering those trials and bringing that news back to Oklahomans. And you realize it wouldn't have been the same if we had a network. If we just had to rely on a network reporter to cover that story, it wouldn't have been the same, because, you've got to tell the Oklahoma, how it affected Oklahomans and the Oklahomans who testified and that were involved in that case. So that was another great experience. And in the Atlanta, when the Summer Olympics happened and the bombing happened, you'll remember Richard Jewell was blamed for that and didn't do it. Clint Eastwood has made an amazing movie about that. But Channel 6 called at 3 a.m. and said, "Get on a plane. And you're going to Atlanta and you've got to cover the Summer Olympics bombing." So I am so grateful that they've had faith in me, that they've kept me for 29 years, and that they've entrusted me to tell a lot of what I think are really important stories. But of course, the bulk of my career has been here, day in, day out, in green country, interviewing victims' families, victims of every unimaginable crime in the world, and interviewing suspects. I've been to prisons and I've sat across from child molesters and rapists and robbers and burglars and serial killers. I've witnessed 7 executions as part of my job as the crime reporter. So it has just been the most fascinating and interesting and fulfilling career. And lots of people I know have a different view about the media now than they did when I started. And I see that all the time. And I try to reassure people there is a difference between your local news stations and the national media, and what some people see as a serious bias in the national media. And we really try to focus on local people and local stories and telling them, I hope, with great objectivity and great integrity and sensitivity. Because of course, on the beat that I've covered, especially, it's important to how you approach those people and how you tell their stories. And you have to do that with great respect. And I think one of the reasons I've done that in the way I have maybe over the years is because when I was 18, my brother was killed by a drunk driver. And so I know what it's like for a family to have a sudden loss and to plan a funeral and to go through all that. And every time I have to pick up the phone or knock on someone's door and say, "Do you want to talk about your loved one who's been taken away from you?" I remember that experience. And I hope that that's shaped how I've approached these victims and their families over the years. But to me, telling their stories has been the most important thing that I've done. Because a lot of victims in the court system, it's all about the suspect. From the time the crime happens, and it's nobody's fault, it's just the way it's geared. From the time the crime happens, you go find the suspect. Now you've arrested him. Now you charge him. Now you prosecute him. And it's all about that suspect and getting them through the system. And sometimes the victims over here kind of like, I've been forgotten. And if there's a plea deal, which there has to be plea deals, the victim sometimes doesn't even get to sit in a courtroom and say to a judge or anyone, "This is what happened to me, and this is what I survived, and this is what I've overcome." And so I often get to sit down with that person and let them tell that story. And they still feel like they've been heard, they've shared what they've experienced, that it mattered, that it counted, that somebody heard their story. And that's been really, really important to me over the years. And probably the thing I miss most about my role now as the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock anchor is I don't get to do those as much anymore. And I do miss that every single day. But we have some great young reporters and I work with them every day. And so I'm, trying to steer them toward how to do those stories and, think about those stories. And so hopefully that's making some bit of a difference. But I definitely miss the adrenaline rush of being out there and chasing stories and chasing bad guys every single day. That's for sure. And I don't want to talk forever. I know people have questions and I'm willing to answer those. So is it okay to start taking questions or?
You bet. It's fine. I'm reading through ones that have been sent in to us, Lori. This first one is kind of a positive, negative, weird thing. It's love the something good that is done on some of the newscasts with KOTV now, because it's always upbeat, it's always uplifting. But is there any chance of getting rid of the one called Speak Up?
That is a great question. So let me start with the something good. So something good, we do research all the time in our industry. It's research, research, research. I'm afraid they probably researched the color of my lipstick. I don't know that part, but we research everything. And so one of the things that we learned during the pandemic, during our research, is that we were all overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed giving the news. You were overwhelmed hearing the news, because it just seems so much. And people just kept saying in our research, just tell us something good. And we're like, we can do that. And so we do that in every single newscast. It's an amazing Oklahoma. It's an honor to a veteran, an honor to a teacher, an amazing Oklahoma, and something good in every single newscast. You got to wade through all the bad stuff to get there, but usually it's very much worth it. And that's something that Scott Thompson did for us for years. He did those Oklahoma traveler stories that were so positive and amazing. So we're very proud of our something good segments. So I'm glad you like those. The Speak Up segment, I will pass that on. That's in our 9:00 newscast on the CW. And they are really just trying to find a way, I think, to have some interaction. Because, you feel like you're sitting up there and you're just talking. And I think they feel like that's a way to get interaction. I know they're trying to ask silly or fun questions so that it's not political or heavy. I know yesterday, I think it was like, what's your favorite cartoon character? I don't know. But I'll pass that along.
I'm waiting for the one where they ask what color is your toothbrush. So
Right.
Another question. Boy, this will be a tough one. Out of all the things you've covered, is there a favorite story you've done?
Man, that is a tough one, because there have been a lot of favorite stories that I've covered. It would be easier for me to tell you the hardest story I've ever covered, which of course was the Oklahoma City bombing trial. Being in that courtroom day after day and hearing the testimony and looking at McVeigh. And I'll tell you, I got to the point, because everybody was crying. The victims, the witnesses, the jury, some of the attorneys, the media. And McVeigh would sit there like, what time is lunch? He didn't care. He didn't care at all. It didn't faze him. The only time he paid attention during the whole trial is when his own sister testified. So I got to the point where I was hating him. And I told my mother, I'm not going back in that courtroom. I hate him. And of course, my mother was like, you got to pray for him. I am not praying for Timothy McVeigh. But I knew it was important to go back in the courtroom every single day, because Oklahomans needed to hear the real impact, the full impact. And so I started praying for him, which is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And so it did help me in my mindset of going into the courtroom every day. Well, we had a 3-day break. I think it was over a Memorial weekend. I don't know. And so I flew my mother out to Denver, and we were going to go to like a Rockies game and, go on a train ride. And she got there in time to go in the courtroom with me for just a couple of hours on that Friday before we took a break. And we are not in there an hour. And she leans over and she goes, I hate that guy. I'm like, what? You told me I had to pray for him. So that's the hardest story I've ever covered. But my favorite, I don't know. Recently, I loved being in Jordan. I loved watching those SWAT games, those men and competing in those unbelievably physically demanding, challenging things, and their joking and their laughter and their camaraderie. That was a really fun story. And so I really enjoyed Jordan most recently. That'd be my most recent favorite for sure.
Great. How about, in your opinion, this is a follow-up to something you said earlier, were the police officers in London as effective without guns?
When we were there, they really were. It was amazing to me that people listened to them. They didn't really resist or struggle. The cops were like, break that up. You're coming to jail. They're like, okay. We're like, oh, see, that's not really our experience in America. But we found that they were. But largely, the cops didn't have guns, but their citizens didn't either. And so it was interesting talking to the cops in London. They thought everybody in America has 3 guns in the back of their pickup. Their impression was everybody is loaded for bear in America, which was, funny to us, because we were like, well, I don't think that's how it is in America. And they just thought we were this violent country. And so it was interesting. Their perceptions, that was really the first time I had that perception that, wait, we don't come from a place of violence, and not everybody's got 13 guns packed in their windshield, but it was just interesting. And, worried more, I think, in our job as the crime reporter and photographer about going to a scene. Of course, I've been on raids with the U.S. Marshals, the DEA, you know, all kinds of agencies, and we wear bulletproof vests, and we worry in those moments when we're on those raids about getting shot, and we're constantly looking for cover as we're shooting our video. But they didn't worry about that at all as officers. You know, that wasn't their worry, that their worry was getting stabbed. We did meet one guy, a police officer who had a gun, but it was in his squad car locked in a safe. And before he could use it, he had to call one supervisor to unlock it, call another supervisor to get the gun out, and call a third supervisor to put a bullet in it. I don't know what it would have taken to actually shoot a gun as an officer over there, but that just amazed us over there, the differences between the cultures at the time.
Wow. This is a unique question. I'm getting phone calls from McAllister. Is that someone inside the prison?
It's possible, but it's more likely that that's a spoof call. So what I see all the time is that these scammers out there, they will spoof a phone number. So they will call from the U.S. Marshal's office and tell you have a warrant. Well, you look at your caller ID and go, well, I must have a warrant. Or they'll call from a prison, or they'll call from the police department. They'll call from TPD and say we're collecting money, which of course they're not doing. Or they'll call from a pharmacy, a doctor's office, and say they need your healthcare information. So they spoof these numbers all the time. And I did a story on this several years ago. It was fascinating. I bought a calling card online for $10, and I could put any number I wanted in someone else's caller ID. It was so fun. So I called my mother and put FBI in her caller ID. And also, you could change your voice from a man to a woman or a woman to a man. So I sounded like a man, called my mother, put FBI. And I told her I was the FBI and she had a warrant, and she believed me. And, you know, I called one of our co-anchors, Glenda Sylvie. Remember when Glenda Sylvie worked at News on 6? And I said I was with the bank, and she sees the bank and her caller ID. I sound like a bank. And Glenda Sylvie gave me her bank account number, by the way. But, you know, you could put anything in. So my guess is it's a spoof. My guess is not probably a prisoner calling you. But if you ever get that, this is a jail call, calling collect. I mean, I get those all the time, of course, because they're trying to reach me. So it could be, but my guess is probably not.
Okay, this one's a comment more than a question, and this comes from me. My wife absolutely loves your self-defense stories that you do to show different things you can do. I hope she never uses them on me, but I do love it that she's learning these from you.
Okay, so thank you. That has been one of the, that's probably one of the most fun things I've done in my career, is that I've really tried, based on learning about all these crimes. I, of course, speak to lots of groups about how to better protect yourself from criminals. But one of the most fun stories is how to be safe in an elevator if someone grabs you, how to be safe in a stairwell if someone grabs you. What are 5 basic needs and moves every person should know to protect themselves? And I've met some great, you know, I've taken those classes from OHP, from a former Navy SEAL. And it's just, I think it's so empowering just to know that you should or could do something in that moment. You know, that every criminal is different and every situation is different. And I tell people, whatever you did as a victim to survive, to be doing this interview, then that was the right thing for you. So if you pretended to be dead and that worked for you, that was the right thing. If you fought back and you're alive to tell your story, that was the right thing to do. But if you did everything they told you, and didn't fight or resist at all, and you're alive today, that was the right thing for you. But I love those self-defense classes. I'm going to do some more of those in the future, because I do think it just gives you something to think about. And what I've seen with crime victims is you've got to think about it before it happens. So you're constantly playing that game in your mind. If this ever happens, what would I do? If this ever happens, what would I do? And by doing that, then you're not caught so off guard when that moment happens, because every victim says, Lori, it happened so fast. Lori, I thought it was a joke. Lori, I didn't know how to, I just froze up. And that is what, you know, it's called lizard brain, and your brain freezes in that moment of trauma. But if you've practiced something over and over in your mind, you visualized it, it makes you so much more likely to respond in a way to save yourself. So I'm glad that you like those. I'm glad your wife likes those, and tell her I hope to do more of those for sure.
Good deal. Okay, another question. What are recent scams that are going on exploiting Tulsans?
Okay, so there's tons, of course. And you guys, if you want to, next Thursday, at 2:30 to 3:30. I'm actually going to give my hour-long cons, frauds, and scam speech virtually. I'm going to do it on my Facebook page, the News on 6 Facebook page, newson6.com. I would love you to stick an elderly loved one in front of a monitor and have them watch that, or have you watch it, because I see lots of young victims. But still, the number one scam going on in Oklahoma, I would say, is the grandparent scam. And they call and say, Grandma, 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 I've been arrested. Don't tell Mom and Dad. I need you to bail me out. And I mean, that one gets people because they, of course, want to help their grandchild. Every victim I've interviewed says, Lori, I swear to you, it sounded like my grandchild. It's not. And they send money. And of course, it's usually put it on a money card, which, you know, now I tell everybody, just never go put money on a GameStop card, a Google Play card, a Visa card, whatever they tell you, it's a lie. The minute they say you have to go put the money on a card, then of course it's a scam, whether it's to pay the IRS, which I hear all the time, avoid a warrant, which I hear all the time, get your kid out of jail, which I hear all the time, go collect your Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes winning, which I hear all the time. So that grandparent scam is still number one. There's no question. I just had a woman lose $35,000. She called me Monday. Her mother lost $35,000 to the Publishers Clearinghouse. So they tell you you've won $2.5 million at a brand new car. And of course, you've got to pay taxes up front, fees up front. You'll get all that money back. And I had a lady lose $100,000 to that one. I interviewed a lady who lost $14,000 to that one. I interviewed a Tahlequah man who lost $40,000 to that one. So that's circulating right now because the Publishers Clearinghouse is actually getting ready to give their prize. But of course, they don't call you and they don't email you if you win, and they never need money up front. No legitimate prize ever does. So I would say grandparent scam and publishers are the two biggies right now. And then the romance scam. You guys, I could do a story on the romance scam every single day. It's huge in Oklahoma. I don't know if it's because we're more trusting, and it doesn't matter what dating site you're on, christianmingle.com, farmersonly.com. They love those websites. But it's, you know, they tell you they love you, they're going to come visit you, you're going to get married, but they need a little money because they can't cash their check, or they need a little money because they've been in the hospital and had a head injury, or whatever it is. And every time they promise to come see you, something comes up. Oh, I can't make it. I had a lady, she lost Tulsa. She's a retired bank executive in Tulsa. She lost $40,000 to that scam. I had a lady in her 50s in Grand Lake. She lost $125,000 to that scam. And then Oklahoma actually had its first $1 million scam victim, and that was a woman in Oklahoma City, and it was the romance scam. So those would be the top three I would say to watch out for, but I'm going to cover tons more in my speech next Thursday from 2:30 to 3:30. If you can join me or have somebody in your family, because, you know, we all have vulnerable parents, uncles, aunts, but I'm seeing a lot of millennials scammed right now as well, which is interesting. It's not just seniors. But those are the three top ones, but there's a ton of them operating here.
So that's a week from tomorrow, the 11th?
It is. And I mean, if you guys, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say the time again so we can all write it down.
Yeah, so it's next Thursday, the 11th, from 2:30 p.m. to 3:30. And I'll speak for about 45 minutes, and then I'll take questions on that as well. But I would just say, Matt, sometime in the future, since you're always looking for programs, if you just wanted me to give that speech for this group, I would do that too, because I give that. It used to be my personal safety, crime safety speech was my most requested, but in the last couple of years, that's been my most requested because scams are just so prevalent. But I have a whole set, you know, topic. So if you don't get to see it next Thursday, if you ever wanted me to do it for your group in the future, we could do that too.
You could actually come every week and speak, and we'd be thrilled, and they'll take me out of a job. So that'd be wonderful.
I don't know about that.
That's all the questions that were sent in during your talk, but I want to thank you hugely for taking time. I know your schedule's crazy, but you're our favorite sister, daughter, whatever you want to call it, and we all love you, and we're just thrilled that you had time to speak to us.
Thank you for asking me. You know, Tulsa Rotary, I love you guys. I've always loved you guys. I've been honored to speak there before, and I would be sad if I wasn't asked to MC the awards banquet. I love doing that every year. It's very special to me that you include me in that. So I am very, very appreciative that you have invited me to do that and invite me back. So thank you very much for that.
Right.
Thank you, Matt.
Oh,
Thank you,
and-
Lori. On behalf of everyone here, thank you, Lori, for taking time to speak with us today. We always enjoy hearing your interesting stories and updates on what's going on in Tulsa and around the world. And thank you also for your continued support of our club. We really appreciate it. Now for an inspirational moment from Daniel Gomez. Daniel.
Thanks, President Paul. So I have with me my prized possession here. It's a Eddie Sutton bobblehead I got back in about 2002. Those of you who remember me from Sarge, you know, I'm a proud Oklahoma State alum. I went there from 2000 to 2005 when the basketball team was much better than our football team. And Eddie Sutton essentially ran the town of Stillwater. He was beloved. And I camped out to be one of the first, I think, 200 people in to get this thing. So I keep it in my office, and it's one of my favorite. I brought it, you know, I got to thinking about him this weekend. Oklahoma State played a basketball game against the University of Arkansas, which of course Eddie Sutton had a history coaching there as well. And if anybody has not yet seen the documentary, it's just called Eddie. It aired on ESPN around the time that he passed away. It's a great story. It really covers his life, you know, the good, but also some of his personal struggles. But the reason I brought him up is because I was thinking about him this weekend well, for two reasons. One, you know, the court in Gallagher Arena is named Eddie Sutton Court, and this weekend they unveiled a new part of that little sticker on the floor to note his entry into the Hall of Fame. Finally in 2020, which was announced just a few weeks before his passing. But also because this weekend was the 20th anniversary of the 2001 plane crash that took the lives of 10 people associated with the program, including Bill Tegans, who was one of our radio guys, and two players and some other people affiliated with the program. And during the broadcast, they mentioned Coach Sutton's speech at the memorial service back in 2001 that was to a full house in Gallagher Arena. And I was there, and I recall it being more important than anything that we ever saw in that arena. And that includes conference championships and things like that. The fact that he was able to stand up there only days after that and give comfort to all of us, I always found that to be one of the more important things that I experienced in college. And if you watch the documentary, it really shows what kind of a toll it took on Coach Sutton personally. He called the families almost immediately after the news. I recall myself, I was living in the dorms at the time, and I found out when a bunch of kids were huddled around the television in the mezzanine level of Kerr Drummond Hall, and people were crying, and it was just it's a very sad experience. But first, I want to plug the documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's fantastic, and I hope people will watch it, especially knowing how Coach Sutton was important to this club. I also wanted to share just a personal story that I think really exemplifies what the positive effect that Coach Sutton had on not just the lives of players, but the OSU people in general. One of my best friends and roommates at the time in Stillwater, a couple of years after all of that, we were in the marching band together, including the pep band for the basketball games. He was in a horrific car accident a few years into college. So he was in the hospital for a long time. He had his jaw wired and things like that. But one of the things that the leaders of the band put together was that Coach Sutton called him directly to his hospital room. And they talked for about 30 minutes, not just about life and things like that, and but also just basketball. And it was it's still one of the highlights of his life. He talks about it all the time. I was with him at the time. We even complained about one of the players who had been struggling for a little while. And it was just a great moment for him. He has Coach Sutton signed a basketball and a photograph, and I know that he still has it. My friend still has it at his home. So I just wanted to share that story just because it came up this weekend, And of course, most people probably know Coach Sutton's favorite quote. He puts it on a lot of his signature blocks, including the one that he's on the photograph he sent to my friend. He says, always have faith in God, yourself, and the Cowboys. So even if you're not an OSU fan, I think that at least those first two are still true today. So thanks for letting me share, President Paul.
Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate the inspirational moment. And Eddie Sutton, Coach Sutton was definitely a big part of our IBO awards for years and helped fundraise for that event for years for us. So we do have a great gratitude for him. Thank you. Now it's Sarge time. I do want to introduce our Sarge, Carl Vincent. Carl?
Oh, President Paul, we've got a new game for you here in 2021. I hope you're ready. We're going to play Who Wants to Be a Rotarianaire? Now, it took me a little while to be able to say that, but we're going to give you the opportunity today, President Paul, to make contributions to the Rotary Club Foundation by using your wits and amazing IQ to answer trivia questions of varying values. So if you're ready, you can see we've got quite a few questions for you here, President Paul, to get to $1 million. We won't get to $1 million today, but we will get a little ways up this ladder. So here's our first question coming up for you, President Paul. When, and I saw him on the call earlier, I know he's here. When did Bob Reed first join the Rotary Club of Tulsa? And your choices, President Paul: A, 1858, B, 1962. 1858 would have been even before Don Woolsey joined the Rotary Club of Tulsa, I'm pretty sure. B, 1962, C, 1968, D, 1972. So President Paul, when did Bob Reed join the Rotary Club of Tulsa?
I know Bob's been a member for a long time, Sarge, but even A seems a little unlikely to me. So I'm crossing that one out. I've got to admit, I'm feeling a little pressure to raise all this money for the foundation today. You put
It's
some
all
pressure
on you, President Paul.
I'll take answer B, please. Final answer.
Final answer, President Paul. President Paul, I got good news for you. You are right. This is a final answer. Bob Reed donated $200 for recognize his birthday and his recent Rotary anniversary. And Bree Segovia found a little meme there with someone being a little surprised at how long Bob has been with us. Bob, we appreciate your contribution to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation today. Let's see, what's our next question? There we go. Here's our next question for you, President Paul. On what month and day is David Downing's birthday? A, February 6th, B, February 31st, C, February 28th, or D, February 29th. Paul, this one's tricky. This one's tricky. I would say,
I think you're trying to trick me on that one. I think, Sarge, that February 31st is a bad answer. So I'm going to
do you want to phone a friend?
Let's eliminate that, but let's do C, final answer.
All right, C, final answer. Let's see, what do we have there? I think, yes, that is correct. You get those points also, President Paul. David Downing gave us $126 for his birthday, and there's some math involved in this problem. He gave $2 per year that he's been around. So that was $126. You're a banker, President Paul. Can you divide 126 by 2 and tell the answer?
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll give you that one, President Paul. We'll move on to the next question. In Who Wants to Be a Rotarianaire? Let's see. You moved up a notch there. Oh, this is a really tricky one, President Paul. On what Rotary committee is Brenda Melancon not serving this year? Choices are A, Above and Beyond, B, International Projects, C, New Members, D, International Youth Exchange? What do you think?
Well, gosh, Sarge, this is a tough one. This may be the toughest one yet because I sit in a lot of the committee meetings, even by Zoom, and Brenda seems to be on all these committees. It seems to me she's around all the time on these committees, everywhere all the time. And so I thought she was on all the committees actually, but if I had to pick one, I guess I'll try A, Above and Beyond Award.
Well, I think you're on a streak here today, President Paul. Brenda Melancon is on all those committees except Above and Beyond. She's donated $50 for water wells in recognition of, I think, because she was in Nicaragua for one of the water well projects. And that's not her water well behind her in the picture on the right. That's actually the ocean. But she was in Honolulu, and it's her Rotary anniversary, and she sent us $50 for that for water wells. We appreciate you, Brenda, and your participation. I think we have another one. This one's a little tricky too, President Paul. You know, we're getting up to the more difficult questions here. You've moved up the ladder quite a ways. Oh yeah, you got to be real careful with this. This involves a woman's age, President Paul. In what year was Rhonda Hayes Rotarian of the Year? Now, I called Past Sarge Daniel Gomez and said, you know, is there a delicate way to put this, Daniel, to avoid getting in trouble? And he just had his Eddie Sutton bobblehead doll there and really didn't offer me any advice. So you got 4 choices here, President Paul. You got to be real careful. A, 2002, 2003. B, 2008, 2009. C, 2009, 2010. Or D, 2011, 2012.
Well, Sarge, this one is going to test my math skills. I'm pretty sure that Rhonda joined our club when she was 19 years old. I think she's now 29. So probably the first year she was a member, she joined. I'll take D, final answer.
Wow, President Paul, you know, that's the most politically correct response I've ever heard on something like this. Figuring out that Rhonda joined when she was, you work backward too, because you knew she was 29 this year and she joined when she was, that was really good, President Paul. Rhonda actually contributed $1,500. She contributed $1,000 in memory of Tim Caldwell for water wells. And then she contributed $500 for her own birthday, her 29th birthday. And Rhonda, we really appreciate your thoughtfulness and your kindness, remembering Tim and making a contribution to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation. And you're the most attractive 29-year-old I have seen in quite some time. Thank you for your contribution. President Paul, I think that wraps up this round of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you win, sir. You did great. Folks, think about us going forward as events come up in your lives or happen, grandchildren's birthdays, trips. Heaven knows if you take a trip, please send us a picture of that with a fine, because those are few and far between. Thank you so much for your contributions. President Paul, back to you.
Thank you, Sarge Carl. Appreciate your work as always. Great work. I do want to say some special thanks to our week's sponsors this week: Interim Healthcare, Terry Heritage; TTCU, Federal Credit Union, Dan Newberry; Upshaw Johnson, Katie Johnson; Monette and Associates, Ed Monette. Thank you for joining our meeting today. Our next Rotary meeting will be at noon next Wednesday, February 10th. Our speaker will be Peggy Simmons, President and COO of Public Service Company. And after I adjourn our meeting today, we're going to offer some breakout rooms for 10 minutes for those who would like to stay on and visit with fellow Rotarians. So please join us in the breakout rooms after the meeting today. I hope you have a great rest of your day and week. And in the words of another great legendary basketball coach, John Wooden, be sure to remember, make each day your masterpiece. And with that, we're adjourned.